Welcome to Go Behind the Ballot, a podcast where two Texas moms go on an educational quest to demystify Texas politics. Join me, Nicole Abshire, and my co-host Claire Campos O'Neill as we deep dive into the most burning issues, hear stories from candidates, and offer hope in these challenging political times. Let's saddle up and go behind the ballot.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Go Behind the Ballot. I'm Claire Campos O'Neill.
And I am Nicole Abshire.
And this episode is going to be a bit of a different episode. We did have something planned that got scratched and reconfigured because we had a big winter storm here in Texas, and that really threw Nicole and my life into a bit of chaos. So we're like, you know what? Let's just use this episode to talk about this winter storm, the impacts it's having on us and other Texans, and why we are stuck in this cycle of chaos. Isn't that how it feels, Nicole?
Oh, 100%. And I also have to throw out for people who listen and don't watch on YouTube, I am in yet another environment. I was consistently in the same environment, which was a studio, like a home studio. And then in a different house for other reasons. And then because of the winter storm, even displaced from there. And now at my mother-in-law's. So yes, if you watch on YouTube, you're seeing yet another environment that I'm recording from without, the best mic or camera, but we're going to roll with it.
Yes, we are pressing forth in spite of this change of plans. So we're just going to roll with it and hopefully bring y'all some valuable information. So we are interrupting our Culture War series, which is just about wrapped up, to bring you the special report about the winter storm that rolled through Texas this week. And this main episode, our Monday episodes are our main episode. It's going to be more emulative, is that a word? It's going to emulate our mini episodes where we typically look at an article to help inform our discussion. So if you're subscribed to our newsletter, which we hope you are, we're going to link the articles that we're going to be referencing in this conversation to help in our understanding of why we are in this place where our state essentially shuts down whenever we have a really bad winter storm. This doesn't seem to happen in other states as often. They seem to have a better response, more robust infrastructure, but we don't, and we wondered why this is the case. So we looked at a really great article from the Texas Tribune. We looked at an article on CNN.com and also one from Feeding Texas, which looked back on Winter Storm Uri, which is the really bad storm that happened 2 years ago, where the power grid in Texas almost failed. So here we are again, 2 years ago.
Wait, Claire, did you say almost failed? For the power
grid?
Did
it fail? Well, they said that the power grid was remember this, 15 minutes away from total blackout. That's what I mean.
Wait, I don't know if I'm following.
Because when Winter Storm Uri happened in February 2021, ERCOT did those rolling blackouts because they said if they didn't do that, the power grid was going to fail. No one in Texas would have power.
Okay, I get it. But because some people still had power, it is not considered a total failure, whereas I see it as a failure because of how devastating it was. But I get it. Technically, it wasn't a total failure.
I mean, it didn't, let's see, annihilate. I feel like I need a better word. Completely go. We weren't completely in the dark, but a lot of people were. It was awful. And our governor, Greg Abbott, was quick to say on Twitter this week, it's not the power grid, folks. It's the local energy suppliers. Okay, true. But the we didn't have power. So whether it's local or the grid, we would hope to see leadership roll up their sleeves and be like, there's a problem, let's fix it. There's a problem, let's find a solution. But instead, it felt like a lot of you're on your own. So it was not a great experience, but we're going to talk about this more in depth. So quick note at the top, we're going to have this episode. And then on Thursday, Nicole has been without power, as she mentioned, many days, and she's going to share what that experience was like. I was very curious. Nicole, what was it like driving on the roads? Because I did not leave my house. And it's interesting hearing her experience, and we're going to share that with y'all. So definitely tune back in on Thursday. All right, let's jump right in. So basically, we're cheap. We're a cheap state. And this is to our detriment. Our state is not prepared for extreme weather, extreme cold weather. I mean, we're used to hot spells, but whenever we get significant freezing rain, we just don't have the infrastructure to combat that. And it seems like our policy is that we wait for warm weather to come. And fortunately, it does come, a few days after the cold weather comes through, but it's not really it's not great when you're in the middle of a storm and you're just in your house freezing because your power has gone out. And this has just caused a lot of problems with many residents. As I keep referencing, in 2021, we had our really bad winter storm where over 200 Texans died because they were without heat. They actually think the number was higher than that, but I think that's officially what's been recorded. Millions of Texans were without electricity, and we're having a lot of flashbacks to that storm right now. Right now, I think we had hundreds of thousands of Texans without power. There's still Texans without power as our recording today on Saturday, February 4th. So this hasn't been resolved. It hasn't been as severe as the 2021 storm, but it's still showing cracks in our system. So Nichole, do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the things you've gleaned since going through this experience and reading some of these articles?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because this is a little more localized than 2021. And yet, the thing that I keep bumping up against as I have read these articles is sort of the lack of preparation, considering what we learned from Uri in 2021. And I cannot help but jump to the conclusion that the experience could have, and in my opinion, should have been different this time around because of what we ought to have learned from Uri. And specifically, what I mean is better communication. There are ample, tidbits and anecdotes and articles that talk about how there was a very clear and recognized need for more communication from government entities in these kinds of situations that have not been implemented. And so we saw that happen again this time, where I don't think any of us at all anticipated this extended loss of power. And then when it happened, there wasn't a way to communicate that was reliable to let Austin Energy in particular know where your power outage was. And then even the information, if it was recorded in air quotes accurately, it may be incorrect within the next 10 to 15 minutes. The online system went down. So then there was a call-in system. I mean, it was really chaotic. And I am someone who I have resources. I have a safety net. I have family who can help me. But I can't imagine what it must have been like for folks who are in more precarious and medically fragile positions. Like, what happens if you rely on some sort of ventilator or oxygen machine and you did not see this coming and it wasn't communicated to you what the timeline was going to be? Because another thing is that originally we were assured that we would have power back by Friday at 6 p.m. Well, then I think relatively quickly after making that announcement, they had to renounce it. So they've not committed to a timeline when all power will be restored. And of course, I can tell you that I still don't have power. So, yeah, it's messy. It's real messy and really frustrating.
Right. Well, and it seems like the preparation, looking back on the things that we lacked in 2021, it's been very different city by city in Texas. I was reading that Dallas that they did take some steps that they learned some lessons from 2021, because in 2021, they lost power at places like libraries and recreation centers, which were set up as warming centers. And I was like, oh no, these places used designated for people to come where they could charge their devices, get warm, be safe, lost power. So they're no longer that. But they put generators in place so that they were ready this time around. So it was like, well, that's reassuring that they learned those lessons and made adjustments so that they were ready this time. And the biggest thing there's a lot of things I'm taking away from this, but these extreme weather events are becoming more frequent. I guess you could still consider them extreme, but they're increasingly common. These extremely hot days and these very, very cold days that are not typical of our weather patterns in Texas. So we can't continue to operate the way we've operated in the past. We have to put in new systems because this is a new climate landscape that we're going to be looking at. So we're foolish to just keep crossing our fingers and hoping we're going to be okay year to year, because clearly we're not. And as they say in this really great Texas Tribune article, it's expensive to be cheap. And I think us continuing to take the cheap route is foolish. But not only that, it's like there is a cost associated with this. When Winter Storm Uri happened, they estimated the economic loss at $300 billion. Does that sound right, Nichole? Like, it was significant.
That's what I read too.
Yeah, like a staggering amount of money, $300 billion. That was more than I think the last two hurricanes combined in damages for the state. So, we're making this choice to not be proactive, but we're paying it on the back end, and people are dying or they're ending up in very precarious situations, like you're saying, Nichole. And I'm just like, come on, guys. Like, we have money. We talk about this a lot on the show, but we have a $33 billion budget surplus. I mean, maybe some of that can be diverted into fixing our infrastructure, whether it's retrofitting trucks so that they can prepare the roads better for the winter storms, or giving money to cities so that they can bury their power lines underground. I don't know, but to just be like, oh yeah, this is tough, huh? It's like, yeah. And you need to fix, leaders, you need to fix it. Someone has to pick up the ball and solve this problem.
Yeah. I feel like if someone were to push back, I think that we would maybe see kind of what you referenced in terms of Governor Abbott's tweets, meaning that this is a local problem and that the majority of the state didn't have the same experience that we had here in Central Texas, and particularly Austin. But I will say, number one, I think that that's probably not a bad thing, right? That we are in session, that our lawmakers got to have, I'm sure some of them, the experience that a lot of us have had. So I think that's good, right? It probably makes it top of mind for those lawmakers while they're in session. But I think that is an important thing for the legislature to consider and have a discussion about. What is local? What is state? Whose responsibilities are what? How are we as a collective state going to address this? Because sure, maybe it was localized to Central Texas and Austin this time around, but come on, weather patterns are showing us that they are getting more extreme. They're getting more frequent. So next time it's going to be fill in the blank. It's going to be Houston. It's going to be Dallas. It's going to be Lubbock. It's going to be, San Antonio. It's going to be McAllen. Like it's going to be someplace else. So it really behooves all of us as a state to look at how we can address this in a way that is proactive. And so that's a point that I wanted to bring up. I also, and maybe you're going here, but I thought this might be a good moment to bring up, and maybe some people researched this after Uri in 2021, which is, what is the grid? So I was just kind of familiarizing myself with that. So what do you think about going there next, Claire?
Yeah, let's talk about the grid. Let's talk about the grid, Nichole, and then we'll talk about what happened here and how it's different. Here being Austin, and I'm sure other places in Texas.
Okay. Well, this again may be familiar to folks, but Texas has its own electric grid. So the way the rest of the US is divided into an eastern half and a western half. And then there's Texas. So there's essentially three electric grids in the US, and we are our own. And that kind of all started to develop in the early 1900s at the turn of the last century. And essentially there's a lot of that you can read about how it goes back to Texas kind of secessionist roots, that we just didn't want to have to be under the thumb of the feds. And of course, we see a lot of that theme kind of continue to play out. So we are on our own electric grid. There have been times where we have had to get energy from other places, particularly Mexico in 2011. So we aren't completely independent. We've also shared power with other places. But for the most part, we are independent and have our own grid. It is run by ERCOT, which is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. And that's how it works here. So they are responsible for the infrastructure that supplies Texas with power. Oh, another thing is that a little over, I think half of our power is generated from natural gas. Oh gosh, am I about to get this wrong? And then I think around 25% is alternative energy. So I think wind turbines and maybe solar. In fact, when we continue to go, I will confirm that, but I'm pretty sure that's about right. I don't know how that last percentage is filled in, so I'll try to make sure that that's more accurate. But that's how this state runs. So another problem, that happened in 2021, right? It was multiple problems. Mm-hmm. We had extreme weather, and then the grid itself failed because it wasn't winterized. And so the sources of power were not able to, like the wind generation stopped, and there wasn't solar that was generated. So there's a quick little, what do we call it? Factoid list about the grid in Texas.
Yes. And what happened? Okay, so as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Governor Abbott was quick to point out that the grid didn't fail this time, and that was not the cause of the power outages. The cause was more localized, and we're going to talk specifically about Austin because that's where we are, and that's what this article references. But what happened was when we had our winter storm, which was caused by ice primarily. They said this in the article, which was interesting, that a half an inch of ice or more is the technical definition of an ice storm. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's like nothing. And they said even a quarter inch of ice accumulation can cause power lines to go down and tree limbs to weigh down ice, which can fall into power lines. So it's this ice that is accumulating on the power lines themselves or trees, which fall on the lines that cause the power to go out. So you have to send out crews to repair, fix them, and get the power back up. Well, that happened in so many places in Austin. That happened, and you had trees falling in roads, and the roads weren't very drivable because the ice on the roads. So it was a very slow process to repair power to a city of almost 2 million people. I mean, not all of us lost power, but it was citywide. And some of the solutions to fix this problem is you could make the power lines go above the tree canopies, but eventually your trees might catch up to that, and that would be an investment. Another solution is to bury your power lines. And a lot of newer neighborhoods are now, I think they're requiring that you have to bury your power lines. I live in a newer neighborhood and our power lines are buried, and most of us did have power. So I'm like, yay, buried power lines. They say some of the negatives of that, though, is that if there is a break in the power system, it's harder to pinpoint it because it's underground. But I think they also say that doesn't happen as frequently. So cost benefit analysis. I think generally, though, the recommendation is burying power lines. However, I was reading that costs almost $1 million per mile to do that. So lots of money, but it's that, or we continue as we do. And if we continue on this path, what we need to do is better vegetation management. We heard about this a lot from Austin Energy. And vegetation management is where they cut back the trees close to power lines. The problem is, though, that there's a big backlog because this has to be done routinely to trees. And a lot of homeowners don't like this. They fight back against it. They don't want their trees to be messed with. And while that's understandable, it's funny. Nichole makes me think of this like individualistic versus communal response. Like, while individually you might not like this, communally it's going to negatively impact all of us. So there's that balance you have to do. And because we haven't kept up with maintaining the vegetation management, power was lost in many, many areas.
Yes. Well, and for anybody who's seen the pictures, it's super stark, right? The number of trees that are down is really, I mean, it says it all. It's really devastating. And so, yeah, you could think about the damage that could have been mitigated if there had been more willingness to trim back. I know some of it would have been inevitable just because of the severity of the storm and the ice. But
Yeah.
it does seem like it could have been better.
Well, and it's kind of a two-pronged problem because you're in a home, let's say that doesn't have power, but you have a road system that you really shouldn't be driving on because it isn't safe. Because our cities typically don't invest in snow removal vehicles that lay down the salt and I think it's brine that helps make it drivable. So you risk more danger. I mean, you risk the danger of staying home and having very, very low temperatures, or you risk going somewhere else, taking shelter in a hotel or with family or a warming center, but driving on treacherous roads. And and that's like you're stuck in a hard place because we're told by leadership, don't leave your home, but you can't stay in your home if the temperature is too low. I mean, I think about people with young, like we were saying, older folks who like literally need power to survive, very young children who should not be getting below a certain temperature. And then a lot of folks are concerned about animals, about pets. Do I leave my pet behind? I mean, we're just stuck in a really precarious state, and it's very preventable, especially in a state. We hear this all the time. A state that is the world's ninth largest economy. So we're a very wealthy state, but yet I don't feel like I'm in a wealthy place when I know my neighbors are struggling, and you look outside and you're like, all these trees have fallen. We can't go anywhere. I mean, it feels weird. It feels kind of post-apocalyptic sometimes.
Driving around definitely felt that way. It was very, very bleak outside. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to see too is that there's all sorts of responses we can have to things like this. And I have been kind of sitting with that a little bit today, which is that I think it is important as a citizen. I believe in our right, my right to criticize, right, and to evaluate the role of leadership and to hold them accountable. I feel like that is, obviously one of the foundational tenets of democracy. But I want to say, and that doesn't make me want to pull out of this bargain, of this American experiment. I love that I have that right. I believe in guaranteeing that right. And I want to make things better for this democracy, for this community. So I just want to point out that this is not me hating on, our city and our state. It's truly because of my love for these things that it's important that we go, okay, mistakes made, let's make it better. And how do we go about doing that?
Yes, I totally agree. And you were saying earlier, having these different government bodies take responsibility for their purview. And I think having good clarity about what's yours and what's mine. What are you responsible for and what am I responsible for? Because I have noticed as I've gotten to know more about local government is that there's a lot of finger pointing. Well, that's the county's responsibility, or that's the city, or that's the state. And it's like, I don't really care whose responsibility it is. It just needs to get done. So y'all work that out amongst yourselves and then let me know once you find a solution. I think that's if you're going to be in these positions, that's how you need to be thinking is, put the ego aside. Like, how do we come together and make sure our citizens have the best life experience that we can realistically provide for them? And yes, a lot of these changes are going to cost money. So let's raise revenue, like do what you need to do. I mean, I think I'm sort of tired of this narrative of we have to cut taxes, give money back. Yes, I think the bottom percent of income earners probably pay way too much and the top don't pay enough. So we got to find a way to pull out that revenue that's equitable, and stop being like taxes. It's like taxes are what bring us well-running societies. Taxes are what provide for really great public schools and good public education. I would like to see the case made for taxing citizens and a reminder that that's the price we pay for civilization. Like, we have to pay for nice things and we want nice things. It's expensive to be cheap. Like, that's the best way to put it. And I think a lesson that we're learning, and we're going to pay. I'd rather pay up front than pay in the end.
Well, and obviously we're talking about the economic cost, but what we haven't even touched on is the mental health cost, right?
Oh,
so
huge.
How about, yes, let's economically pay and also try to save on some of that mental health cost also, because this is hard. This is really hard on people. And my experience, I'm sure, does not even compare to some people's experience. And I can tell you, if you're watching on YouTube, like, I'm not looking my best. I have showered within the past couple of days, which feels like a major victory. But I feel like if you were to view me, you would go, "Oh, Nichole's having an experience right now," and I am. Let me tell you. So it's a lot to take on.
It's a lot. Yeah. And like, school's been canceled for most of the week and you had to make adjustments. Some folks, I don't know if it was this article or another one that I read. I mean, they're if you're an hourly wage earner and you're not going to work, you're not making money that week. Well, that throws a real wrench in your life and in your finances, and that can have huge consequences. So, I mean, unfortunately, like time and time again, it's the folks who probably earn the least that are taking the real brunt of this. This makes me think about this video I saw on TikTok of HEB, not that far from me, about 15, 20 minutes away, where people were taking food that was dumped out because I think the HEB had lost power, so they had to throw away all the things in their frozen section, and folks were dumpster diving and taking the food, and the comments were crazy, like, but it's like, these people need food. I don't know, like, if it's out and it's trash, so to speak, and that's what they are comfortable taking home with them, you must be in a really tough spot. So there's a lot of changes that need to happen. We're just hanging in there and trying to find some solutions, because the way things are going, it's not a good trajectory. It's not good that 2 years ago we had a horrible winter storm, and here we are 2 years down the line, and we're still dealing with these terrible repercussions. And it's like, this is ridiculous. I mean, it's been all over the state, but we're focusing a little bit more on Austin this episode. And Austin, I mean, the city is like dripping in wealth. We have like so many tech companies that have relocated here. You have like Oracle and Dell and Tesla, and like Google's has some of their staff members here, and Facebook. And it's like, this can't be good for them. So I would love to see some of the business leaders be like, you know what, legislators, this is hurting us as well. And I want to see some pushback from those folks and say, if you're going to be this economic destination, you're going to provide these services, and we're going to pay if that's what it requires. We're not going to nickel and dime you and say, give us tax breaks, because they also need to buy into our system if they're going to be, it's a reciprocal thing, I guess is what I'm saying.
100%. I've thought that a lot, that I really feel that if we could get a real strong group of business leaders to advocate for change, I feel like that would probably speak to lawmakers more than anything. And the truth is, like, they do bear some responsibility, right? Because our population increase is somewhat tied to their presence here. And that also is another strain on the grid, right? So it's like we really are all in this together.
Yeah. I think we still have, well, when I went to this interview that the Texas Tribune had with Glenn Hagar, and I'm pretty sure he said that Texas is still seeing a population increase of 1,000 people per day, whether it's like natural births or immigration into the state. That's a lot of people to absorb, and it's pulling from our infrastructure. So we need to make sure we're investing back into our infrastructure and not just like being bare bones on what we can get by with, because we're seeing the breaks, the cracks, in the system. And come on, like, this is not the way to run the world's 9th largest economy. It's embarrassing.
I know.
Yeah.
We're like old ladies sitting around, we're knitting and, these people.
Yeah. Like, these people need to step it up. Well, we recommend you sign up for our newsletter. You can do that at our website, gobehindtheballot.com. We have these articles attached. We haven't mentioned this yet, but I'll mention there's a CNN article that we're going to link in the newsletter. And they just have this crazy footage of cars driving in Dallas, and you can just see the like dangerous conditions. These cars on highways, like doing like a 45-degree angle, and these other cars having to navigate past them. I mean, it makes you really see why they say don't travel on the roads. Like, wow, they're dangerous. Here in Austin, the first day of the storm, Tuesday, there was a 10-car pileup that resulted in a fatality on this intersection that I drive pretty much every day. I mean, it's like, we are not prepared for this. And to just shut down the state? Come on, guys. Like, we can't do that anymore.
I know.
Yeah. And we also linked the Feeding Texas article because they had some really good statistics about all the support they provided after the 2021 storm. And they also quote that statistic about how the state had $300 billion in damages. So really good, like, little factoids. So check those out, learn a little bit more, and tune in on Thursday where we're going to talk about Nichole's experience. I mean, I don't know if I'm excited. I'm curious to learn more.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
And what call we haven't made in a while is, if you enjoy listening to us, leave us a review and a rating on whatever platform you listen to.
Or share with your friends. Tell your friends, oh my goodness, these ladies bring amazing shows. Even when they have no power and their children are driving them crazy, they still show up. Like, that's our commitment.
Yeah, even if it's like in a corner of a room that's, we're here.
Yes, we're here. We love spreading information about how to make Texas better. So thanks for tuning in, and we will chat with y'all soon.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me, Nichole Abshire, and my co-host, Claire Campos O'Neill, on Go Behind the Ballot. Hopefully, we've demystified some little portion of Texas politics, and we hope that you'll do more with us. Check out our website at www.gobehindtheballot.com, where you'll find links to all of our social media, and you will find our community. Let's join together and do more. We hope you'll let us know what is working, and we hope you'll join us next week. Thanks, everybody, and have a good one.